So DIPLOMICS, which stands for Distributed Platform in Omics, is a research infrastructure that's funded by the Department of Science and Innovation through its South African Research Infrastructure Roadmap program. So a research infrastructure is meant to be a resource for the research community. So it compensates for the fact that in high-tech industries, you often need very expensive instrumentation. You might need multiple instruments. You need the bricks and mortar infrastructure to house those instruments. You need the people that are trained in order to operate those systems. And you need all the ancillary equipment like freezers and laboratory management systems. So the idea is that that's very difficult, especially in a context like South Africa, to have these independently created. So a research infrastructure then provides those combined and concentrated resources in strategically selected areas that the research community can use for their research purposes. DIPLOMICS is actually the only one that is fully within the biotech space, and even in biotechnology, we're very focused on what we call the omics fields, and that includes genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, and bioinformatics. So the structure of DIPLOMICS as a research infrastructure is a bit unusual because we've taken a network approach. So instead of a single concentrated or single highly resourced facility, we're actually distributed across the country using already existing laboratories that are either core facilities within a university, they might be core facilities within a science council like the Agricultural Research Council, or they're private or semi-private or non-profit laboratories. But they all share in common the fact that they provide services to the research community within their specialty areas.
Through the DIPLOMICS network, Syngene has access to training opportunities, also the placement of specific equipment. It really assists Syngene to be on top at least of the latest technologies. And yeah, so also by networking with these labs, we have access to technologies and knowledge they have in their labs, and we don't have to duplicate it. We can rather collaborate with them instead of duplicating all the same equipment at Syngene.
The idea was to use the already existing labs and then federate them as a virtual single entity within the country. So one lab might specialize in next generation sequencing, another specializes in mass spectrometry and proteomics, but they would all work together as a single virtual research infrastructure.
At any one moment, you have to be that flexible and that agile to be able to fit into the different, dimensions that you are trying to serve. And so for us, DIPLOMICS offered that support. I think it came as a network, which, although working within the omics technology, it was multidisciplinary in terms of, the consortium members, but also, the resources and the expertise that they came up and put together. So we saw that as a fellowship, as a group where you can meet and share those ideas and move in one direction in driving, the omics technologies in the country, but also in the region.
So what we've now done is expanded this network model to start including smaller, more rural or historically disadvantaged institutions to be part of this network. And the benefits to them would be, again, accessibility to the technology, but also to the expertise and to training, and also just to more awareness and knowledge about the latest trends in their fields.
The biggest benefits of the DIPLOMICS initiative is that it brings the platforms together. So we meet and we start to discuss things. We start to discuss research opportunities, we discuss training opportunities, infrastructure development, and it's done on a much larger level than what we would do as individuals or just collaborating with each other. So that's the biggest benefit. The way in which DIPLOMICS could potentially leverage the existing infrastructure and expertise to make it available to society at large in a much broader way. That's where the real opportunity lies, and this is why we are part of it.
So DIPLOMICS' role is in a way to democratize that. It's to enable and improve access to students and researchers from anywhere within South Africa who would like to perform research or take on projects that would require the kind of high-end infrastructure that you need in omics. It plays a couple of roles. One is to improve the research infrastructure in the country. So that we do by bringing in equipment. Well, firstly, we identify where we have gaps in instrumentation. We can fill those by buying those instruments and placing them where they'll be best utilized. Another role we play is to take a bit of a risk and bring in new technologies or showcase new technologies that might already be in use elsewhere, but not here in South Africa. So we can take that risk and the financial burden of bringing it in and setting it up and testing it to see if it's of value to the local community. Another role we play is the enabling aspect. So we can enable researchers to be able to do research that requires these high-end instruments and all the infrastructure that goes with it, including the training, the service and maintenance, et cetera. And the enabling comes in by making that open and accessible. So it's not siloed and it's not sequestered away in some individual's laboratory. It's an open and nationally accessible system.
I'm currently a second-year master's student, upgrading to PhD very soon, in the host genetics group, specifically working on COVID-19, and I form part of the Division of Molecular Biology and Human Genetics at Stellenbosch University. So basically what the host genetics research group aims to do is to see if there are any human genetic factors that can impact the severity of disease, specifically for COVID-19. The SAMRC has played a crucial role in this study. We use the BGI-Seq 2000, which is a DNA sequencing machine. So basically, it sequences the entire genome or all the DNA of an individual, and then that is sent to me. And then I analyze the data to see if I can find any of these DNA changes that can explain these extreme disease outcomes. So without that machine at the SAMRC, that would not be possible. So it is very instrumental to the project to look at the entire genome so that we can explain where maybe there is a change that can explain the phenotype that we see. So specifically for the COVID-19 host genetics initiative that I form part of, DIPLOMICS has funded about 100 patient samples to be DNA sequenced, and this data will then contribute to a larger international COVID-19 host genetics initiative or consortium. So these platforms, I believe, are very important because this will put South Africa on the map for genomics and other omics initiatives. So this will also then help contribute to fight against future pandemics, and so help South Africa to be part of the development of treatments and vaccines to so help save lives in the future as well. I believe that DIPLOMICS is very important for future students because they can provide these training opportunities, provide funding for certain projects to continue, and so contribute to future science.
The cost of doing omics research is often prohibitive. So one of our aims is to help bring down that cost in a number of different ways. One is the actual reduction of cost by using a single buyer approach. So DIPLOMICS has that ability, unlike a university or a science council. The other is to improve the efficiency of the infrastructure that we already have. So for example, instead of each lab in the country and every university having its own sequencer or mass spectrometer, we can say, well, rather use an existing resource that's well maintained and well operated so that you don't have to take on that cost. And then we can provide training on those instruments as well. So a lot of it is about creating efficiency in the system.
Here at ORI, we use meta-barcoding to assess a zooplankton species. So basically, we are barcoding whole communities instead of one individual at a time. Zooplankton help to assess the level of climate change that's going on in the ocean. So they help us to understand what is going on in the oceans and the impacts of climate change. We basically do the base level of what we need to do in the lab, and I send everything to CRISP where they do everything upstream. So having access to the MySeq platform at CRISP has really benefited us because we are able to carry out work and carry out research at an international level. And we are able to do things like next generation sequencing, which normal labs in South Africa, even though we have fully functional labs, we don't have the infrastructure and we don't have the facilities to carry out such types of sequencing. And the reason why we do that and we spend that little extra money is because we know we guarantee the quality data that's coming out of what we're getting from CRISP. If there wasn't a CRISP in Durban, we would need to do all the lab work here and send it off to labs outside of KZN. So the cost will be greater, transportation, which is a problem because our samples here that we work with are temperature specific. So having a lab down the road from us helps us because the quality of our sequences and our samples are not compromised.
And then the other important role we play is training. Training is an increasingly vital aspect of research infrastructure. You need people. Instruments is not enough. Instruments are not enough. You need the people to run them. They know how to operate them. They know how to design the research projects that go onto those instruments. They need training in how you analyze the data. So again, an infrastructure program ends up being much more than just the equipment. It's that full value chain from project design to value gained from the research. And it happens that the infrastructure or the hardware aspect is just one component. So initially our training was focused on the technicians within our partner labs. And we found that while that was a very well-embraced approach, we kept getting requests for more training. And we found that people affiliated with those labs said, can we also get some training on these instruments? So one of our key partners is Thermo Fisher Scientific, and we've had a very successful program with them where we have a contract with them for them to provide additional training, not only for the technicians within the network, but for research groups or academic departments that for one reason or another don't have access to the training that they would need to do omics research.
DIPLOMICS has partnered with Thermo Fisher to provide a whole series of these trainings. So not just real-time PCR, it's everything from bioinformatics to basic sample preparation that's covering the entire molecular biology spectrum. And this is necessary to really upgrade the level of scientific skills and technical human resources within the country in order to allow us to compete internationally.
So as we've grown and developed, we've taken on a much broader role, going beyond instrumentation and service and maintenance to expanding our training, and now really looking even at things like bringing awareness and visibility to what is omics, why is it important to the country, why should we be putting taxpayers' money into something that might seem esoteric to the average person. The impact that DIPLOMICS has is a bit different than the way you would measure impact, say, from a university or a science council. Traditionally, they're measured by publications, grant money, students graduated in different levels of degrees. We are an enabling entity, so we enable universities and science councils to do that, but we don't directly influence those outcomes. So we look at a different set of measures of our impact. First is, how are we changing the landscape? Can we improve the number and the variety of instruments? Can we improve the uptime and the availability of those instruments? Can we improve the training of the technicians who manage and use those instruments? And more recently, we can measure our impact by providing additional training that may not be accessible through a traditional university or science council environment. And a lot of that is more advanced analytical methods, for example. So our impacts are different, but they're just as important as the other measures. So another way that we've changed and matured in our mandate for DIPLOMICS is that we've identified a tremendous need for the ability to analyze complex data. So it's not enough just to say we can produce data, we need to be able to analyze it. And what's been missing in South Africa is an open and accessible means to bioinformatics. So bioinformatics is the field that combines computer science with biology, and it really is an outcome of the genome sequencing revolution, where you can produce vast amounts of data, and you need the resources of both computer scientists and biologists and statisticians to manage that data and to analyze it and extract the value from that. So one of the things we noticed is, because of that gap, we created what we call a Bioinformatics Marketplace. We've branded it Clarity, and the idea is that we make available bioinformaticians, very skilled bioinformaticians, through our website and through our marketplace to be open and accessible to anybody who needs bioinformatics support.
I think from a bioinformatics side, just to bring awareness of bioinformatics as a service is such a big thing. And I think we're starting off slow with Clarity. but I think it's really about changing mindsets about how bioinformatics is included at project design. So I think it's a positive small shift, and all of these little small shifts will ultimately result in something big. But as you know, bioinformatics is about data analysis, so it underpins what happens in genomics and what happens in proteomics. So I think for me, one of the important things is to really change that mindset about bioinformatics. It's not an afterthought, it's something that you think about. So all of the effort that you're doing is in order for you to create data. So I think where you analyze and how you analyze the data should be equally important. So I think we've been working with great labs, great partners who really have that same mindset, and we're pushing in the same direction.
So one of the other aspects of the way DIPLOMICS is changing its mandate or modifying its mandate is this idea of spatial transformation, which is bringing omics technology to students and researchers that would previously not have had access to it, and by also introducing or promoting technologies that better enables that. So we've talked about concentrated, well-resourced facilities for omics, which you do need, but now we've got technologies like nanopore sequencing devices, which are the size of a paperback, fully self-contained, quite inexpensive, that we can take anywhere and allow students and researchers to do real-time genomics research in a field setting, for example, or in a comparatively under-resourced laboratory. And that's a key element in helping improve access for students and researchers to omics technology. I keep using the same terms, enabling and access or accessibility. So what the nanopore spatial transformation project combination is doing is really just creating more opportunities and better accessibility to omics-based research. I think that the strength we have is the fact that there's already very good scientific capability in the country within omics, so that we can ride on. And I did say it's small and dispersed, but it's there. So we already have globally equivalent competence in our scientists. So that's a great starting point. Now what we need to do is just fill in the gaps and strengthen that and hone it. So I would say our strength is the fact we actually have a very good scientific community to build upon. The other strength we have is that we take a bird's eye view. We're probably the only entity that is truly independent. We're not an academic group, we're not an NGO, we're a program. And so by not being affiliated to any one lab, we can approach everyone. So we are able to have an expansive view and look at all of the resources and the capabilities in the country, and also identify the gaps and opportunities. And that doesn't really exist in any of the universities or science councils in the same way. So what I hope for the future of DIPLOMICS is that we continue to bring awareness and visibility to the capabilities of omics, what omics can do for researchers in the country, but even further to bring some kind of understanding of what omics does for the country generally. So for example, it might help with food security, it might help us track and monitor the next outbreak of a disease, it'll help us improve biodiversity protection and help us intelligently use the natural resources that we already have.